Szanowni Państwo, europejska
Ladies and gentlemen,
gospodarka dzisiaj wymaga wzmocnienia.
we need to strengthen the European economy today because it is only a strong European economy that will translate into security, safety for Europe. And in order to build a strong European economy, we have to make sure that it is competitive as soon as possible. And it is the competitiveness of Europe's economy that we devote the whole of the Council today. It was a very important meeting, the first one under the Polish presidency. I am accompanying the Vice President here with the feeling of a duty well performed, because the agenda that we covered today gives us a chance to make European economy truly competitive. What have we managed to discuss today then? First of all, the Council wants to simplify the legislation when it comes to the functioning of European businesses, but we also want to make the scope of simplification broader, so it will also cover the issues of the environment, for example. That's also very important. Secondly, I'm very happy to note the Minister's approach to the delegation or seconding of workers, the e-declaration that we're going to use, which translates into lower costs for those businesses who are seconding their workers. So these are two very important issues that we discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. Merci pour l'organisation.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for organising the agenda and putting these points on the agenda. So this is at the start of the mandate of the new European Commission, and this Council allowed us to agree on our industrial policy. We began by presenting our competitive compass, the green industrial deal, the clean industrial deal, and a number of other points. There were also proposals which I discussed with ministers and the presidency, where we want to make progress, and a plan was presented and that was well received by stakeholders and everyone along the value chain. And we will continue to work on this to draw up proposals on the clean industrial deal. It's about reindustrialization and decarbonization. Minister, you said simplification is also essential. It's been promised. And there will be two phases, 1 and 2. We have a text, a legislative text that will go through the co-decision procedure through the Member States and the European Parliament. We developed all the sectoral plans. Next week we will be dealing with the steel plan, and then the strategic dialogue on chemicals, and on the 25th of March I will be bringing together stakeholders from the sector to discuss with Commissioner colleagues, including Val, to discuss this. In addition to the sectorial plans, I would like to mention that we've had an announcement that Norvolt will be going into liquidation. And of course, we have 1.8 billion euros to support industry, and that's for the automotive sector, and that's something that was presented batteries to. We want to achieve 40% of our battery production in Europe by 2030. So this is a crucial issue for member states to ensure that we really boost this industry in Europe. It's a key sector for other sectors of the industry. And there will be also expectations, of course, about upcoming initiatives. Minister, you mentioned that there is urgency here throughout the member states when it comes to industry. There will be various plans. It's about getting the entire sectors involved, from the businesses, the social partners, trade unions, to help us develop these plans. Europe will be decarbonized. It's also about economic security in Europe. Europe will be more integrated because that will be our strength. Things will be simpler. We will, of course, be developing omnibus packages, and it's about production in Europe and made in Europe. That's also something that will be reflected in the legislative text. So that's essentially what we had. Now it's approximately 100 days since the start of the mandate, and Europe is now very different to what it was. We have things facing us that we couldn't have anticipated, but we will have to deal with them in a flexible way. This is what the Commission wants to do as well, become more flexible. That applies to the industrial sector as well. The industrial policy needs to be managed, and all our industries are looking to this because it's very easy to let our industries break down, but rebuilding our industry will be a difficult situation. So we need to take action, and we need to do this in the coming months.
And to conclude on what has been a very special day, we have a partner on our hands who has refused dialogue on trade. But today, this morning, I said that Europe will continue to reach out to offer a hand of friendship. It's essential that we reconsider the basis of European defence. We are at a historic moment for Europe, and we intend to protect our citizens, including when it comes to the cost of living, and to protect our businesses, which is why Europe has taken the decision to react, and we will continue to react on trade to defend our economy and jobs. Thank you.
Léa Marchal from Agence Europe. A question on the omnibus package. First, can you say if a fast-track procedure at the council level is possible, if you feel a willingness from member states to go that way, or at least on some of the texts of the omnibus package? And a second question on the clean industrial deal. Could you expand on the content of the debate today? What are points that are very consensual among the member states or less consensual? If I take the example of the European preference, is there appetite among member states for that? Thank you.
This is a question for the Council.
Myślę, że Europa wyciąga wnioski.
Well, I think that Europe is drawing conclusions, and we are very well aware that there's no time to waste. We cannot discuss for too long. And Omnibus serves as a proof that we need to act as soon as possible, as economies from other regions of the world are not going to wait for us to act. So if we do not simplify the European legislation, if we not broaden the scope of simplification to cover the environment or public procurement then it will be a done deal. We won't be competitive in the global market. And as a result of that, the economy is going to be weaker and weaker. And this will result in a situation where, as a region, we're going to count less and less. So on the issue of simplification, this goes to show that we have learned our lesson, and there's no need to protract negotiations. No, we need to act fast and efficiently, and this is our takeaway as a presidency.
Thank you. Nico? Sorry, Nico first, please.
Minister, you chose to use the term simplification in your opening statement. That is not a term that many of your colleagues used during the discussion on the omnibus. If you had to describe the spirit of the discussions today, were you discussing simplification or deregulation? And on the CBAM meeting that took place behind closed doors, can you convey the sentiment expressed by member states regarding the Commission proposal?
But it is my impression that in Europe we have some problems with definitions. So there's a part of the member states, and I happen to represent one of those. We understand simplification as deregulation. And there is another group of the member states that see this process as a far-reaching one. But there's no need to have a quarrel about definitions and how we define the definitions. What is the most important thing is that we managed to reach a compromise that was clearly visible. There is no way we cannot turn our backs on simplifying the legal situation when it comes to how businesses are run. So we have to put a stop to such practices that we saw in the last 4 years of the Commission's term of office, where we had many new regulations regarding how businesses are run, including the most important businesses. So we speak of it as the president. I'm talking about SMEs, which are the backbone of European economy. So if we were to repeat this process every 4 years, then there's no way they're going to last much longer. So there is an agreement to the effect that we need to change this process. As far as the definitions are concerned, I don't think that this is really important. What is important is that we agree on the direction to take. On CBAM, I think we've had a very, very good discussion today, and I'm sure that the Commissioner is going to confirm it. This has been, as I've said, a very, very good discussion. And I don't think there have been any significant differences between us.
Thank you. Yes, here, the lady in front.
Bonjour, Laura, merci pour le contexte.
Good morning. Good afternoon. I have a question for the Commissioner on the strategic dialogue on chemicals, which you announced. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about what the format will be? We've already had similar dialogues for other sectors, but they didn't always have the same format. And I wonder what you think the deliverable would be. Will there be some kind of package soon? And also participation. Who will participate? Will it just be a dialogue with stakeholders from industry, or will you also be inviting civil society? The Commissioner. I did touch on this in my introduction, but I'm happy to give more details. This dialogue is particularly going to start among the commissioners. So at the Commission level, of course, industry will be invited also, and we're looking to build sector-based plans with all of the stakeholders. What that means is the suppliers would also be involved as well. As you're probably aware, the chemicals industry is often called the industry of industries. Behind the chemicals industry, there are many other industries across many different sectors. Each sector, of course, is different. The car industry has its own suppliers, etc. But chemicals provide inputs to all sorts of other industries. But it goes without saying that we would be seeking to involve all the stakeholders from the value chain based on the issues that the chemicals industry currently faces. We have to determine what's important in the chemicals industry. Firstly, it's an industry that's lost a lot of its profit margin following the rapid increase in energy prices. Secondly, we have to modernize a lot of the equipment used in the industry. I mentioned this afternoon with the ministers that there's a measure of modernization for large parts of the equipment used in the industry, in the chemicals industry, which is sometimes more than 40 years old, which isn't energy efficient, which isn't environmentally friendly, and which leads to a loss of competitiveness in the European chemicals industry. So we have to find ways with the sector to see how we can invest and modernize so that margins can recover, because as I said, due to energy prices here in Europe, those margins have dropped. They've also dropped because of international competition. Then there's the question of the European rearmament plan, Rearm Europe, an announcement on which was made earlier this week. We're going to need the chemicals industry as part of that. Poland, I know, is particularly attentive to the chemicals industry for reasons of defense. I'm certain, I'm confident that we'll be able to develop a plan. The ultimate form which that takes, time will tell, but I'm confident that we'll get to a plan and that will then lead to the necessary legislative steps. In any event, I'm going to be following the same doctrine as I've followed with other sectors. It will be a business plan, not any kind of added regulative burden. We are trying to ensure that these sectors gain in competitiveness, meaning greater simplicity, greater modernization and financing, and greater harmonization rather than greater regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Fabio, please.
Hi, thank you for the floor. This is Fabio Napoli for the Italian news agency Policy Europe. I got a couple of questions for the Commissioner. I would like to know which other sectors the next omnibus in the pipeline will impact. For instance, the EU leaders ask for an omnibus on defense. I don't know. And I would like to know the opinion of the Commissioner on the so-called Made in Europe clause. This is part of the discussion. There might be in the proposals on defense that the Commission is going to propose next week. I would like to know your opinion and if this Made in Europe clause will be part of the proposals, and if so, how? Thank you.
Thank you. Je vais peut-être répondre à votre question. La deuxième, je la laisserai peut-être à mes collègues.
Perhaps I'll leave the second part of your question to the colleague, and I'll answer the first part of the question.
Je peux vous dire sur les secteurs et sur
on the sectors and on our ambition then.
D'abord, il y a deux familles d'industries qui sont stratégiques en Europe.
There are two families of strategic industries in Europe. On the one hand, what I'm going to call historic industries, which feed into other industries. We've mentioned cars, chemicals, steel. There can be no state, no collective without steel. And although it's not very profitable right now, we have to do everything we can to make steel production more competitive in the future. And we have to do everything we can in this period to protect the sector, because it is a key tool for industry. It's very easy, as I've already said, to throw away industry and industrial might, but it's difficult to build it back up. So in that entire you've got that historic family of industries, and we have to make improvements there. We have a number of tools to do that. Firstly, we have to make sure that the regulatory framework is fully adapted and that it is predictable for industry. And on that, I think that we in Europe perhaps are a little ahead of the game compared to, say, our American friends, who have now found themselves in a kind of regulatory unpredictability, where nobody knows what the rules are going to be from one day to the next. We in Europe have rules. They are very well known. We're immersed in modification, modernization of those rules, so that in the months and years to come, we'll have a framework in place that incentivizes investment. The second family of industries are new industries, the industries which will generate jobs at some stage down the line, industries which will make future generations proud of us. These are the clean techs, fintech, a number of industries where we want to remain leaders in the world and where we have to provide a helping hand to encourage these industries to gain in productivity and in staying at the cutting edge. It's a very different set of issues at stake. It's investment, it's betting on industries of the future, but the two families are complementary to one another, and that's why they are our priorities in this Commission. On the other questions, on the defense issues, I don't want to get into that any more than to say that the Commission President made an announcement of significant investment using partially European funds, and I think she was sending a very clear signal to not only member states but also to the wider world. Europe is a project we are building. Often we make the greatest progress during crises, and we are building our independence and our defence. Now it falls to the member states to take the necessary steps, because the Commission does not have power in the field of defence.
Thank you so much. Perhaps we can take one of the last questions. Lorenzo, please.
Oui, Lorenzo Consoli, Asca News Italy. Je voulais demander.
I have a question for the Commissioner
Monsieur le ministre,
and
concernant
the
le
Minister
débat sur le CBAM.
about the debate on
Il y a
CBAM.
eu un omnibus qui a
There was an omnibus
déjà simplifié le CBAM.
to already simplify
Il a
CBAM,
réduit le nombre de
reducing
drastiquement le nombre des entreprises
drastically the number of companies affected by the CBAM obligations. But now I see that there are further requests with regard to CBAM, one from the Italian minister, for example, particularly with regard to European enterprises that export and who are not particularly interested in or affected by CBAM, because these are European companies exporting to countries where there are different rules and where in those third countries there aren't the CBAM rules. So my question is whether the decisions concerning CBAM are sufficient, or are you anticipating, if you like, the review of the CBAM rules that certain ministers have requested? Well, I'll let the minister speak for the member states, but as far as the Commission is concerned, the Italian minister did raise a serious concern. We've done everything we could to simplify CBAM. And in doing so, I think more than 90% of the companies were excluded. But we still cover 99% of the field, so that's an example of good simplification. And this is what we want to do for companies. And this step will be proposed to the Member States, the Council. And I think under the aegis of the presidency, we will have good feedback. And on the Commission's simplification pillar. Now, you talked about enlarging the scope of CBAM to make sure that derivative products are not included in the scope. Well, when it comes to this, it is something we are considering at the moment. And the Minister and I have realized just how urgent it is to react here. And I have made the suggestion to the ministers that I will come back to them with a proposal prepared together with my colleagues. It's about giving an answer to these sectors that could be protected by enlarging the scope of CBAM. But those are two different elements. They're not contradictory. The first is about good simplification because the objectives are the same, but nevertheless, we have liberated 99% of companies from the obligation because they represented just 1% of the problem. So it's not deregulation, it's good simplification. And the second pillar is the scope. And we will get back to the Competitiveness Council on the scope with some very concrete proposals.
Odpowiadając na pytanie pana
To
redaktora,
reply to your question,
celem, jaki sobie stawiamy
the objective that we want to realize today is to bring back on track the competitiveness of the EU, the reconstruction of the European industry. This is the goal, and CBAM is just a means to achieve this end. So this is by no means an end of discussion. We're speeding up the discussion. And we are in an intensive dialogue on the shape and form of those solutions for the industry, on how the industry can compete with China or the United States. That's our objective today.